When the most feared gunslinger in Wyoming territory rode back into his childhood town, he didn't know he was riding into a trap 20 years in the making. He came for revenge. He came to face the bully who had tormented him, the man who had turned his childhood into a living hell. But in this town, ghosts didn't stay buried, and the man he was looking for was no longer just a bully. He was a monster. And this monster had friends. The gunshot that would change everything was still 3 hours away when Samuel Hayes first saw the crooked wooden sign that read, Cedar Falls, population 847. It was a number that hadn't changed much in 2 decades. His horse's hooves kicked up little clouds of dust, each one a memory rising from the dry earth. The heat of the 1879 summer made the air shimmer, making the whole town look like a bad dream you couldn't quite wake up from. Sam pulled the brim of his hat down, shadowing eyes that had seen too much. 20 years. 20 long years since he'd run from this place, a boy of 15 with a split lip and a heart full of shame. He wasn't that boy anymore. The Colt Peacemaker hanging low on his hip was proof of that. It was a different kind of story, written in lead and leather. The town looked smaller, sadder. The buildings seemed to sag, leaning on each other for support like tired old men. He recognized the general store with its busted porch step, the one no one ever bothered to fix. He saw Mrs. Patterson's flower boxes, still hanging from the second-floor windows, though the red geraniums were gone, replaced by wilting petunias. Some things change, Sam thought. But the important things, the things that fester in the dark, they never do. A dog started barking behind the blacksmith's shop, a sharp, angry sound that made Sam's hand twitch toward his gun. It was a reflex, burned into his nerves from years of sleeping with one eye open. He forced his fingers to relax, to grip the reins instead. He was in control now. He had to be. The saloon doors swung open as he rode past. A man stumbled out into the blinding sun, already drunk, reeking of cheap whiskey and regret. The drunk squinted, his eyes struggling to focus on the shape of Sam on his horse. "Hey," he slurred, pointing a shaky finger. "You look familiar. Do I know you?" Sam kept riding. He didn't answer. Silence was a weapon he'd learned to use just as well as his gun. The drunk shrugged and staggered back into the darkness of the saloon, the moment already forgotten. Up ahead, a group of children played in the street, their shouts echoing in the quiet air. They were having a stick fight, pretending to be heroes. But one boy was bigger than the rest. He swung his stick harder, laughing when the smaller kids cried out. A cold knot formed in Sam's stomach. That laugh, he knew that laugh. "That's not fair, Billy!" one of the little ones yelled, nursing a bruised arm. "You're too big!" The bigger boy, Billy, just sneered. "Life ain't fair, runt. Better learn that now." He knocked the smaller boy flat on his back. Sam pulled his horse to a halt. The creak of the saddle leather was the only sound. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that made all the children freeze. Billy looked up, his face a mask of childish arrogance, his stick held like a club. "What do you want, mister?" Sam swung his leg over the saddle, his boots landing in the dust with a soft thud. He was a tall man, imposing, but he knelt down on one knee, bringing himself closer to the boy's level, looking him dead in the eye. "How about you pick on someone your own size?" Billy's sneer faltered. "Like who?" Sam's voice was cold as a winter creek. "Like me." The color drained from Billy's face. He dropped the stick as if it had turned into a snake and ran, disappearing into a nearby house without a single look back. The smaller children stared at Sam, their eyes wide with awe. "Are you a real cowboy?" a little girl whispered. A smile touched Sam's lips, but it felt foreign, like an old coat that didn't fit anymore. "I suppose I am." Another boy, bolder now, stepped forward. "Do you have a gun?" Sam nodded. "I do." The little girl's eyes lit up. "Are you gonna shoot Billy?" The smile vanished from Sam's face. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "Real cowboys don't shoot kids. Not even the mean ones." He could see their disappointment. They wanted a show. They wanted the kind of justice that comes from the barrel of a gun. He understood. He'd felt that way once, a long time ago. He got back on his horse and rode on. the weight of the past settling on his shoulders again. He saw the boarding house where his mother used to scrub floors, the place owned by Martha Caldwell. According to the letters she'd sent him over the years, carefully forwarded from one town to the next, she was the only person here who might be glad to see him. But he needed a drink first. The dust and the memories had made his throat feel like it was lined with sandpaper. The Silver Dollar Saloon looked just as he remembered, a place where men went to lose themselves. He tied his horse to the hitching post and pushed through the swinging doors. The air inside was cool and smelled of stale beer and sawdust. The bartender was new, a skinny man with eyes that darted around like a trapped bird. "What'll it be, stranger?" the bartender asked, his voice cracking a little. "Whiskey, the good stuff." Sam took his glass to a table in the corner, the one with a clear view of the door. An old habit. You never sit with your back to the door, not if you want to live long. The whiskey burned, a clean fire that chased away some of the coldness inside him. The boy who had fled this town was dead and buried. In his place sat a man who knew how to survive. He'd learned that the world was full of bullies, and the only way to deal with them was to be faster, smarter, and meaner. As the afternoon bled into evening, the saloon started to fill up. Ranch hands, storekeepers, men with tired faces and calloused hands. Sam listened to their talk, a phantom in the corner. They talked about the price of cattle, the lack of rain, the usual rhythm of small-town life. It was a life he'd sometimes dreamed of on cold, lonely nights under the stars. A peaceful life. A safe life. A boring life. Then he heard a name that turned his blood to ice. "Bull Morrison's been in a mood all week," a rancher said, his voice low. "Beat up Jake Stevens yesterday for spilling his beer. Someone ought to do something about that man." Another man snorted into his glass. "And who's gonna do it? The sheriff? Bradley's so scared of Bull he'd probably arrest himself if Bull told him to." A third voice, barely a whisper, added, "Bull's killed 3 men that we know of. Maybe more." Sam's hand tightened around his whiskey glass, his knuckles white. Bull Morrison, the ghost he'd come back to face. The architect of his childhood misery. The whisper continued, laced with fear. "I heard Bull's been asking around, looking for some gunslinger who might be heading this way. Someone from the old days." The saloon suddenly felt like a coffin. The air was too thick, too hot. Sam drained his whiskey in one gulp, the fire in his throat doing nothing to warm the chill in his soul. He dropped a coin on the table and walked out, leaving the whispers and the fear behind him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. A beautiful sunset. But Sam knew better. The prettiest sunsets often brought the worst storms. He untied his horse and led her toward the boarding house. He needed a room. He needed a meal. He needed to think. Bull Morrison was here. He was worse than ever. He was a killer. Some things don't change, Sam thought again, a bitter taste in his mouth. But this time, he wasn't running. This time, he was the storm. The steps of Martha Caldwell's boarding house groaned under his weight, announcing his return to the whole town. Before his knuckles could even touch the wood, the door swung open. A woman with hair as white as snow stood there, but her eyes, they were the same. They sparkled with a kindness that time hadn't been able to touch. "Samuel Hayes," she said, her voice a soft melody. "I wondered when you'd finally come home." "Hello, Mrs. Martha," he said, pulling off his hat. "Hoped you might have a spare room." "For you, Samuel?" "Always." She ushered him inside, the scent of baking bread and lavender soap wrapping around him like a warm blanket. It was the smell of the only safe place he had ever known. "But I have to warn you," she said, her smile fading a little. "News travels faster than a prairie fire in this town. Half of Cedar Falls already knows you're back." She led him up to a room at the top of the stairs, one with a window that looked out over the main street. "You can see most everything from here," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Might be useful, considering." "Considering what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Martha's face hardened. "Bull Morrison. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that he has unfinished business with you. Spouting off in the saloon about how he's been waiting 20 years to finish what he started. Sam dropped his saddlebags on the patchwork quilt. Some men just never grow up. This isn't about growing up, Samuel. This is about hate. Bull's gotten meaner with age, like milk left in the sun. He runs this town. People are afraid of him. The sheriff is useless, more of a mouse than a man. Through the window, Sam watched the lamplight begin to flicker on in the houses below. It looked so peaceful, so ordinary. A perfect picture hiding a rotten core. "How many has he killed?" Sam asked, his voice flat. "3 for certain. The last one was 6 months ago. A traveling salesman who didn't laugh at one of Bull's jokes. Bull claimed it was self-defense. Sheriff Bradley just nodded and filed the paperwork." Sam had seen men like Bull all across the territory. Bullies who tasted blood and liked it. They wrapped themselves in fear, using it like a shield. They were the most dangerous kind of men, because they had nothing to lose and a lifetime of inadequacy to prove wrong. A sharp knock on the front door downstairs broke the silence. He heard Martha answer it, and then a young man's voice, tense and urgent. "Mrs. Caldwell, is it true? Is Sam Hayes really here?" "Why don't you ask him yourself, Jake?" Martha said, her footsteps returning up the stairs. She came back with a young man, tall and lean, with a deputy's badge pinned crookedly to his shirt. His eyes were honest, but his face was a storm of conflict. There was something familiar about him. A shadow of a face Sam had spent 2 decades trying to forget. "Mr. Hayes," the young man said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "I'm Jake Morrison. Deputy Jake Morrison." Morrison. The name was a punch to the gut. "You're Bull's son." Jake's face flushed a deep, painful red. "Yes, sir, I am. But I need you to know. I'm nothing like him. I pinned on this badge to protect people, not to be like him." Sam looked the boy over. He had his father's broad shoulders, but none of the cruelty in the eyes. His handshake was firm, but not a challenge. He met Sam's gaze without flinching. "Your father and I have some history," Sam said, the understatement of the century. "I know. He's told the stories. His version, anyway." Jake took a breath, like he was about to dive into deep water. "Mr. Hayes, I came here to warn you. My father's been drinking since noon. He's working himself into a rage. He's coming for you tonight." "Let him come," Sam said, his voice a low growl. "You don't understand," Jake pleaded, stepping closer. "He's not the same kid who pushed you around in the schoolyard. He's a killer, Mr. Hayes. He enjoys it. He won't give you a fair fight if he can avoid it. He'll shoot you in the back if he gets the chance." Sam turned to the window, watching the darkness swallow the town whole. Somewhere out there, his past was drinking whiskey and loading a gun. "Are you asking me to run, Jake?" "No, sir," Jake said, his voice filled with a surprising strength. "I'm asking you to be ready, because my father, he isn't just a man anymore. He's a disease, and I think you're the only cure this town has." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Sam didn't come back to be a hero. He came back to bury a ghost. But now, the ghost's own son was asking him to save them all. What in God's name had he ridden into? After Jake left, a cloud of shame and determination hanging around him, Martha brought Sam a plate of beef stew that tasted of home. They ate in a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who don't need words to understand each other. She told him about the town, about who had married, who had died, who had moved on. It was a quiet accounting of lives lived in the shadow of Bull Morrison's tyranny. "You ever think about staying, Samuel?" she asked, her hands busy clearing the plates. "I'm a drifter, Mrs. Martha. It's all I know how to be." "That's not what I asked," she said, her gaze sharp. Sam managed a small, tired smile. "Sometimes. But men like me, we carry too much with us. We don't get to have roots." "Everyone carries baggage, son," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The question is whether you let it break your back or teach you how to stand up straight." Before he could answer, the night was shattered by the sound of breaking glass from down the street. It was followed by a roar of drunken fury that could only belong to one man. Martha's face went white. The saloon. Sam was already on his feet, buckling his gun belt. His hand rested on the worn leather grip of his Colt. It felt like coming home. "Sounds like Bull's ready to talk," he said. "Samuel, wait! Be careful!" Martha cried. But he was already gone. 20 years of running. 20 years of looking over his shoulder. It all came down to this. The main street was deserted, a stage set for a tragedy. Figures watched from behind parted curtains, their faces pale in the moonlight. The whole town was holding its breath. The saloon doors were splintered, hanging off their hinges. Light and noise spilled out onto the boardwalk like a foul wound. Sam heard Bull's voice, thick with whiskey and rage. "Where is he? Where's that yellow-bellied coward Sam Hayes? Too scared to face me?" Sam stepped out of the shadows and into the doorway. The saloon went dead silent. Every single eye turned to him. Bull Morrison stood in the middle of the room, a half-empty bottle in one hand, a pistol in the other. He was bigger than Sam remembered, bloated with years of easy living and cheap liquor. His hair was graying, but his eyes held the same piggish cruelty. Those eyes locked onto Sam's. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "Well, well," Bull slurred, his voice a venomous rasp. "Look what the cat dragged in. Come back to get another beating, Sammy." Sam's boot hit the dusty ground with a soft thud that echoed through the silent street. Every window in Cedar Falls now had a face pressed against it. Bull Morrison's ugly laugh cut through the tension like a dull, rusty saw. "Look at you, all dressed up like a big, tough gunslinger. But I remember. I remember when you pissed your pants in front of the whole schoolyard, 'cause I took your lunch money." He raised his voice, a performance for the hidden audience. "You all remember that, folks. Little Sammy Hayes, crying for his mama." The words were like tiny, poisoned darts, finding all the old wounds. Sam could feel the heat rising in his face, the same helpless shame he'd felt as a boy. But this time, something was different. This time, his hand wasn't shaking. His blood ran cold, not hot. 20 years of surviving on the edge had forged something new inside him, something hard and unbreakable. "That was a long time ago, Bull," Sam said, his voice as calm and steady as a tombstone. Bull spat a stream of tobacco juice that landed inches from Sam's boot. "Not so long that I've forgotten how to make you cry." He cracked his knuckles, a sound like dry twigs snapping. "Still got these?" he said, holding up his ham-sized fists. But Sam saw the truth. He saw the soft belly straining against the buttons of Bull's shirt. He saw the slight tremor in the hand holding the gun. He saw the fear lurking behind the drunken bluster. "You've gotten old, Bull." The words hit their mark. Bull's face turned a blotchy, furious red. "I'll show you old." His hand, the one holding the gun, started to rise. What happened next became a legend in Cedar Falls. Before Bull's pistol was even halfway level, Sam's hand blurred. It was a flash of motion, too fast for the eye to properly follow. The crack of the gunshot was deafening. But it wasn't Sam who fell. A new hole appeared in the Silver Dollar Saloon sign, right above Bull's head. Bull froze, his own gun still pointed at the floorboards, his mouth hanging open. Sam's Colt was drawn, smoke curling from the barrel, aimed dead center at Bull's chest. The entire town seemed to exhale at once. Bull's gun clattered from his nerveless fingers, hitting the boardwalk with a hollow clank. His hands shot up into the air, shaking like aspen leaves in a gale. "Now hold on, Sam," he stammered, his voice suddenly 2 octaves higher. "Hold on. We're just having some fun. Old times, you know." Sam didn't move. The barrel of his Colt remained fixed on Bull's rapidly beating heart. One twitch of his finger, and 20 years of nightmares would be over. The man who had ruled Cedar Falls with his fists was visibly trembling. Sweat poured down his face, and a dark, wet stain was spreading across the front of his trousers. "Please," Bull whimpered, the sound broken and pathetic. "Please don't shoot. I got a family, Sam. I got a wife, kids." "You should have thought of that before you decided to wave a gun at me," Sam said. But even as he spoke, a new, unexpected feeling began to bubble up inside him. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't triumph. It was pity. This trembling, terrified creature wasn't the monster from his memories. He was just a sad, old man. Just then, a figure pushed through the onlookers. It was Jake Morrison, his deputy badge glinting in the lamplight. His face was a mask of agony as he stared at his father. "Pa," Jake said, his voice full of shame. "What have you done?" Bull's wild eyes darted to his son. "Jake! Boy, tell him. Tell him I'm a changed man. Tell him I don't cause trouble no more." Jake just shook his head, his expression grim. "I can't do that, Pa. The whole town knows it ain't true." But Bull wasn't done begging. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, his big body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. "Please, Sam," he sobbed, tears carving paths through the grime on his cheeks. "I'll leave. I'll leave town tonight. You'll never see me again. Just don't kill me in front of my boy." Sam looked from the crying man on the ground to the stone-faced son standing over him. This wasn't the revenge he had imagined. This wasn't justice. This was just ugly. But then Bull said something that changed everything. "Don't do this, Hayes," he pleaded, desperation making him reckless. "They'll kill us all. They're coming. My partners. They're not like me. They won't just beat you up. They'll burn this whole town to the ground." Partners? Sam's mind raced. The whispered conversation in the saloon. Bull asking about a gunslinger. This was never just about a schoolyard feud. He had walked into something much, much bigger. And by facing down his past, he might have just doomed the entire town. Time stopped. The only sound was Bull Morrison's pathetic sobbing and the frantic pounding of Sam's own heart. His finger was still on the trigger. 20 years of rage, of shame, of sleepless nights were all pressing down on that one tiny piece of steel. "Partners?" Sam's voice was a low growl. "What partners?" Bull looked up, his face a mess of tears and terror. "The Garrett gang," he whispered, the name dropping into the silence like a stone into a deep well. "Iron Mike Garrett. They were supposed to meet me here. We had a deal. The Garrett gang." Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Iron Mike Garrett wasn't just an outlaw, he was a plague. He didn't just rob towns, he erased them. And Bull Morrison, the local tyrant, had invited that plague right to Cedar Falls' doorstep. "Get up," Sam said, his voice rough. Bull blinked, confused. "What?" "I said get up," Sam repeated, lowering his gun an inch. "A man shouldn't die on his knees." Bull scrambled to his feet, his hands still held high. The crowd murmured, confused by the turn of events. They had come to see a showdown, a simple story of revenge. They weren't prepared for this. From the porch of the boarding house, Martha Caldwell stepped forward. "Samuel," she called, her voice clear and strong. "Your mother always said you had a good heart. Don't let this man's poison make you a killer." His mother. The memory of her was a sharp, sudden ache. What would she think of him now, with a man's life in his hands? Jake Morrison moved to stand beside Martha, his face pale but resolute. "She's right, Mr. Hayes. My father deserves to be punished, but not by you. Not like this. If you kill him, you become him." "That ain't true," Bull yelped, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Sam's a good man. I was always the rotten one." "Shut up," Sam snapped, the rage returning. He pointed the gun back at Bull's chest. "You don't get to say my name." He looked at Bull, truly looked at him, and saw the whole rotten story. The bully, who was too scared to face the world on his own. So he partnered with killers. The man who terrorized his own town, his own family, all to feed a pathetic need to feel big. Killing him would be easy. It would be an ending. But it wouldn't be justice. "You're going to ride out of here, Bull," Sam said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You're not going to stop for your family. You're not going to stop for your belongings. You're going to get on your horse and you're not going to look back. If I ever see your face in this territory again, I will kill you. Do you understand? Bull nodded frantically, tears of relief now mixing with the tears of fear. Yes, Sam. Anything, thank you. Don't thank me, Sam said, holstering his Colt with a final decisive click. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for your son, and for this town. Now get! Bull didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled for his horse, hauled his pathetic bulk into the saddle, and spurred the animal into a gallop, disappearing into the darkness without a single look back. A strange quiet fell over the street. The show was over. The townspeople began to disperse, talking in hushed, excited tones. They had seen a ghost defeated. But Sam knew the truth. He hadn't banished a ghost. He'd just kicked a hornet's nest, and now the whole swarm was heading their way. Sheriff Bradley, who had been hiding behind the corner of his office for the entire confrontation, finally emerged, trying to look authoritative. Well, Sam, he said, clearing his throat, reckon you handled that. That was the easy part, Sheriff, Sam said, turning to face the old lawman. The hard part is coming. He looked at Jake, whose face was a mixture of relief and dread. Tell me everything you know about your father's deal with Iron Mike Garrett. Jake swallowed hard. Not much. Pa was always secretive. But I heard him talking a few weeks back. Something about a bank payroll train coming through Laramie. Garrett was supposed to hit it, then lay low here. Pa was going to get a share for providing a safe house and supplies. Sam's blood ran cold. The Laramie payroll job had been all over the papers. 3 guards killed, $500,000 in gold gone, and it was all supposed to end up here, in Cedar Falls. They're not coming here to lay low anymore, Sam said, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. Bull ran. That makes him a liability. And Garrett doesn't leave loose ends. He's coming here to get his money, and he's coming here to wipe out anyone who knows he was ever supposed to be here. A woman in the crowd gasped. The reality of the situation began to sink in. They weren't safe. They had just traded one monster for a whole pack of them. Sheriff Bradley paled. The Garrett gang? Here? We don't have enough men. We don't have enough guns. We have me, Sam said simply. And we have him. He nodded toward Jake. The sheriff frowned. The boy? He's a Morrison. The town council won't even let me make him a full deputy. I don't care what the town council says, Sam shot back. I saw him stand up to his own father tonight. He's got more courage than any man on your council. I'll ride with him. Martha stepped forward, her face set with determination. This is our town. We're not going to let a pack of wolves take it from us. A new energy began to spread through the remaining crowd. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. Resolve. The blacksmith, a mountain of a man named Gunner, spoke up. I've got my father's old buffalo rifle. Old Pete, the store owner, nodded. I've got a dozen shotguns and enough ammunition to fight a war. Sam looked at the faces around him. Simple, hard-working people. They weren't fighters, but they were willing to stand their ground. All right, Sam said, taking charge. Sheriff, you and Pete start handing out those guns to anyone who knows how to use one. Gunner, I need you and your boys to barricade the main road. Use wagons, barrels, anything you can find. Jake, you're with me. We're going to find the best defensive positions. As the town scrambled into a frenzy of preparation, a distant sound carried on the night wind. It was faint at first, like the rolling of faraway thunder, but it was growing louder. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of hoofbeats. Dozens of them. They're coming, Jake said, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. And they're coming fast. Sam looked up at the moon, a pale, cold eye in the black sky. He had come back to Cedar Falls to settle a score from his past. He never imagined he would have to save its future. The riders appeared over the ridge, silhouetted against the moonlight like riders from hell. There were more than a dozen of them, a small army of seasoned killers. Their leader rode at the front, a large, broad-shouldered man whose reputation preceded him. Iron Mike Garrett. He pulled his men to a halt just outside the town, the jingle of their harnesses echoing in the tense silence. Well, well, Garrett's voice boomed, dripping with menace. Look what we have here. A welcoming party. He dismounted, his movements confident and predatory. I'm looking for a man named Bull Morrison. He owes me something. Anyone care to tell me where he is? Sam stepped out from behind the barricade, his Colt in his hand. He's gone, and he's not coming back. Garrett's eyes, cold and dark as a snake's, fixed on Sam. I know you. You're Sam Hayes. Killed a friend of mine down in El Paso. He drew first, Sam said. Garrett laughed, a humorless, grating sound. They always do. Doesn't matter. Bull made me a promise. He promised me a town that was quiet and cooperative. This doesn't look quiet and cooperative. He gestured to the armed townspeople peering over the barricade. So, here's the new deal. You give me what Bull owed me, plus a little extra for my trouble, and I'll leave you enough of your town to rebuild. You refuse, and I'll salt the earth where it once stood. Behind Sam, Sheriff Bradley trembled. We don't have anything for you. Oh, I think you do, Garrett said with a cruel smile. I think you have a bank, and I think you have lives to lose. You have 1 hour to decide. He turned and walked back to his men, as calm as if he were ordering a drink. The townspeople looked at Sam, their faces a mixture of terror and hope. He was a gunslinger, a drifter. He had no reason to stay. He could ride away, and no one would blame him. But as he looked at Martha's determined face, at Jake's nervous but steady gaze, at the scared but resolute townspeople, he knew he couldn't run. Not again. Barricade the rest of the town, Sam ordered, his voice ringing with authority. Put shooters in the second-story windows. We're not giving them a damn thing. He had come here seeking revenge on one man. Now, he was about to go to war for an entire town. The quiet streets of his childhood were about to become a battlefield. The hour passed in a blur of frantic activity. Every door was barred, every window shuttered except for a narrow slit for a rifle barrel. The women and children were hidden away in the storm cellar of the church, their frightened prayers a low murmur beneath the floorboards. Sam and Jake moved from position to position, checking on the nervous defenders. They were farmers and shopkeepers, not soldiers, their hands more accustomed to a plow than a trigger. Sam knew their chances were slim. Garrett's men were professionals, but a cornered animal is a dangerous thing, and the people of Cedar Falls had been cornered. The clock on the church tower began to strike the hour. Each chime was like a hammer blow to the town's collective nerve. As the last chime faded, a single rider emerged from Garrett's camp, carrying a white flag. It was a trick. Sam knew it was a trick. "Don't shoot!" the rider called out. "The boss wants to talk to Hayes, alone!" "Stay here," Sam told Jake, before climbing over the barricade and walking out into the no-man's land between the two forces. Iron Mike Garrett met him halfway, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Last chance, Hayes," Garrett said. "This doesn't have to get bloody." "It already is," Sam replied. "You saw to that in Laramie." Garrett shrugged. "The cost of doing business, but I'm a reasonable man. I've got a new offer. You're fast, I'll give you that. A man like you could be useful. Ride with me. I'll give you a share bigger than anything Bull ever dreamed of. We'll leave this pathetic town to its fate and be rich men by sunrise." Sam looked into Garrett's eyes and saw nothing but a cold, empty darkness. "I'll pass." Garrett's face tightened. Wrong answer. He was fast. Deceptively fast for a man his size. His hand dropped to his gun. But Sam was faster. He had been expecting it. Sam didn't draw to kill. He drew to disarm. His bullet struck Garrett's gun, sending it spinning from his hand in a shower of sparks. Garrett stared at his empty, stinging hand in disbelief. From the outlaw camp, a dozen rifles were leveled at Sam. "Hold your fire!" Garrett roared at his men, his eyes blazing with a newfound hateful respect for Sam. "This one's mine." What happened next was not a gunfight. It was a signal. Garrett drew a second pistol from his belt and fired it straight up into the air. From all around the town, gunfire erupted. It wasn't just coming from the front. Garrett's men had used the parley to surround them completely. They were trapped. Bullets ripped through the barricades, splintering wood and kicking up dust. A cry of pain came from the blacksmith shop as Gunner took a bullet to the leg. The fight for Cedar Falls had begun. Sam sprinted back to the barricade, bullets whining past his ears. The townspeople were firing back, a chaotic, desperate volley of lead. "They're trying to pin us down," Sam yelled to Jake over the din. "They'll make their main push from the south, through the livery." "How do you know?" Jake shouted back. "Because that's what I would do." The outlaws were smart. They set fire to a hay wagon, rolling it toward the general store to create smoke and confusion. Under the cover of the smoke, half a dozen of them made a break for the livery stable at the south end of town. "Jake, cover me!" Sam yelled. He vaulted over the barricade and ran, not away from the fire, but straight through the choking smoke. He emerged on the other side, just as the outlaws were about to breach the stable doors. He opened fire, his two Colts speaking a language of death that the outlaws understood all too well. 3 of them went down before they even knew what hit them. The other 3 scrambled for cover, firing blindly into the smoke. From a window in the boarding house, Martha Caldwell appeared with an old shotgun. She wasn't a good shot, but she didn't need to be. The blast from the shotgun ripped through the wall next to one of the outlaws, sending him screaming as splinters of wood tore into his face. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The air grew thick with gunpowder and the smell of blood. More townspeople fell, but for everyone that did, another seemed to find a new reserve of courage. Old Pete, the store owner, managed to shoot an outlaw off the roof of the saloon. Sheriff Bradley, shaking with fear but holding his ground, took down another who tried to flank them. Jake Morrison was a revelation. He fought with a cool, deadly efficiency, his face set like stone. He was everywhere, plugging gaps in their defense, encouraging the other fighters, proving with every shot that he was not his father's son. The turning point came when Iron Mike Garrett, enraged by the unexpected resistance, decided to end things himself. He led a charge straight down the main street, his remaining men behind him, screaming like banshees. It was a foolish, arrogant move, and Sam had been waiting for it. "Now!" Sam yelled. From the roof of the bank, Jake kicked over a barrel of lamp oil that they had painstakingly hauled up earlier. The oil cascaded down onto the street just as Garrett and his men charged through. Sam fired a single shot, not at the men, but at the oil-slicked ground. The world exploded into a wall of fire. Horses screamed and reared, throwing their riders into the inferno. Men caught in the blaze ran blindly, their bodies wreathed in flames. It was a vision from hell. Iron Mike Garrett, his clothes smoldering, managed to roll out of the fire, his face a mask of fury and pain. He saw Sam standing alone in the middle of the street, reloading his pistols. "Hayes!" Garrett screamed, raising his own gun. The 2 men stood 50 yards apart, surrounded by the chaos and carnage of the battle. The other fights seemed to fade away. There was only this: the gunslinger who had come home, and the outlaw who had followed him there. They fired at the same time. The sound of the 2 shots was like a single, final thunderclap. Sam felt a white-hot pain sear through his shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to one knee, his left arm useless. But his own shot had flown true. Iron Mike Garrett stood frozen for a second, a look of surprise on his face. A small, dark hole had appeared in the center of his chest. He looked down at it, then back up at Sam. He opened his mouth to say something, but only a gurgle of blood came out. Then, he collapsed into the dust and lay still. A stunned silence fell over the street, broken only by the crackle of the flames and the groans of the wounded. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader fall, lost their nerve. They threw down their guns and surrendered. It was over. The townspeople slowly emerged from their hiding places, their faces smudged with soot, their eyes wide with shock and relief. They had done it. They had faced the devil and won. Jake rushed to Sam's side, helping him to his feet. "You're hit." "It's nothing," Sam grunted, though his vision was starting to blur at the edges. "Just a scratch." Martha Caldwell ran towards them, tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around Sam, careful of his wounded shoulder. "Your mother would have been so proud," she sobbed. "So proud." Dr. Peterson patched up Sam's shoulder as the town began the grim task of counting its dead and tending to its wounded. They had lost 4 people, including Sheriff Bradley, who had died defending the bank. But they had survived. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the battered but defiant town, Jake Morrison walked over to Sam, the late sheriff's star in his hand. "The town council took a vote," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They want me to be the new sheriff." Sam looked at the young man, at the quiet strength in his eyes, and smiled. They couldn't have picked a better man. "I'll need a deputy," Jake said, a small grin playing on his lips. "Someone to teach me the ropes." Sam looked out at the street, at the town he had once fled in shame. He saw the faces of the people who had fought alongside him, who had trusted him. He saw Martha, who had never given up on him. He saw a future he never thought he could have. The scared boy who ran away was finally gone. In his place was a man who had found his home. "I think," Sam said, the pain in his shoulder already starting to feel like a distant memory, "I can stick around for a while." He had come back looking for revenge, but he'd found something else entirely: redemption. And for the first time in 20 years, Sam Hayes felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story of a man facing down the ghosts of his past, don't forget to shoot that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next tale.